Hello, everybody. It's Christy Whitman with the Quantum Success Show, where you can get your information and inspiration to create your desires. And as you can see, I have a friend with me, and I am so excited to introduce you, my family, to this amazing woman. I have a very personal connection with her, and she's just incredible, just pioneer in being an author and a healer. Geneen Roth's pioneering books were among the first to link compulsive eating and perpetual dieting with deeply personal and spiritual issues that go far beyond food and weight and body image. She believes that we eat the way we live, and that our relationships to food, money, love is an exact reflection of our deepest held beliefs about ourselves and the amount of joy and abundance and pain and scarcity that we believe we have or are allowed to have in our lives. So very similar to what my perspective is. And rather than pushing away the crazy things that we do, Geneen's work really proceeds with a conviction that our actions and beliefs make absolutely exquisite sense, and that the way to transform our relationships with food, or anything for that matter, is to be open and curious and kind with ourselves instead of punishing and being impatient and harsh. And in the past 30 years, she has worked with hundreds of thousands of people using meditation, inquiry, and set of 7 steps to freedom with food that are the foundation of natural eating. She has been on so many different media, especially Oprah, and that's how I had my connection with Geneen years ago. She's the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling book, Women, Food, and God. And just real quick, Geneen, your book, When Food is Love, you were on Oprah show in, I think we said it was like 92, 93. And my sister, who was just compulsive about everything, but she was compulsive about watching Oprah. And she had a food issue. She had issues with everything. She was addicted to everyone and everything that she could get her hands on that was outside of herself. And food had always been, and her weight had always been such a big, huge problem. And I remember she bought me your book, which I still have. I had it packed up in Montreal when we moved here. And she bought me her book and said, "You have to read this. Oh my God." And when she passed 20 years ago, the one area that she didn't have an issue was, and I don't know why she compartmentalized it and didn't see that it was for other things like drugs and people and all sorts of things, but she was able to get it, that food is not love. And so I had said to you many times when I met you that in TLC, that I'm doing what I do now because of your groundbreaking work and the fact that you had discovered that food is not love and the deeper issues that really go when you compulsively eat and, do the things that we do as human beings to avoid our feelings and avoid what's really going on. And the fact that you were on Oprah and my sister saw you and bought your book, you gave her a little sense of peace in a life that was really very painful for her. So I deeply, deeply thank you for that from the bottom of my heart.
I love hearing that. It's very touching and very moving, and it just makes me glad that that the books are out there, and that I can be, words can come through me like that to be a vehicle to touch people like your sister. And because I don't meet so many of the people that read the books, I'm just thrilled to meet you and hear that personal story. It's gorgeous, gorgeous. Yeah, it means everything. Yeah.
And it's true. It's because of my sister and the fact that she was watching Oprah, and to have an author like yourself on the show that wasn't about just another diet, but to the depth of our being, and to really inquire within ourselves and welcome how we're actually feeling and start, being aware and looking at ourselves from a deeper perspective, that she wrote, she gave me these books. She gave me my first, personal development book, and all that led me to where I am now and being able to serve and, do similar things with my writing and teaching and coaching. And so it really was just, it's such a full circle moment for me to have you on my show. So I'm thrilled to have you here.
Yes, I love that. Thank you.
And we're here to talk about your new book, because most of your books have been about ending the suffering that women feel around food and weight and their bodies. And if you haven't read any of Geneen's books, you have to. When Food is Love is the first one I read, but the #1 New York Times best-selling book that Oprah, you were on Super Soul Sunday, is When Food is God. Is that correct?
Women, now I'm going to forget it. It's Women, Food, and God.
Women, Food.
Or somebody once said to me, I read your book. I read that book. It was called Women, Sex, and God. And I was like, no, I think that's probably a different book. Not my book.
That's a book I haven't written yet.
Yeah, I haven't written that one yet.
That's funny. But that book, Women, Food, and God, was actually Oprah Winfrey's favorite. So can you tell us a bit about your history and take us from being known to be able to help women heal their addictions and their impulses and their issues with food and their bodies to now this new book, which is The Messy, Magnificent Life?
Yes. And Christy, your sister's story sort of circles back. I'll talk about that at the very end of me telling you how I got to be doing this and why I wrote this new book. But just a very laser version of my history with food. I lived in a hell realm with food, I would say, for many, many years of my life, gaining and losing over 1,000 pounds and going on every single possible diet there was. There wasn't anything that I missed. I made up a lot of diets myself, the all brown diet, which was coffee, diet cream soda, and cigarettes for 3 weeks. That's just an example of, crazy diets that I went on. I was anorexic for a while. I was bulimic. I spit up. But mostly I loathed myself. And the way that expressed itself was through my relationship with food. And I believed that if I could handle that, then everything else could be handled. And if I would lose weight, everything would be solved. And so at some point on the verge of suicide myself, I decided to stop dieting and realized that the one thing I had never tried was using food as a doorway, being interested in why I was doing what I was doing, and assuming that I was sane and made sense. And before that, I thought I was insane and crazy and lacked willpower. And that was the beginning for me of pretty much everything. That opened the door for food. Then I started writing about it. I lost weight. I started very small groups in my living room, 10 people in my living room, charge them $1 a night, just to see if not dieting and looking inside this way worked for people. It's not that we didn't pay attention to food, but we took away the shame, force, deprivation, fear, and punishment aspect of it. And so it did work. It worked for me. It worked for the people that I worked with. And I have been doing that for many, many years. I did write a book about my cat and my father at some point. I wrote a book about money after we lost all of ours. And this book started because, like your sister, in a way, I thought that everything I learned through food would automatically translate to the entire rest of my life. And what I found was that it wasn't translating. I found that I was still waking up with anxiety, with some degree of fear. I had this crazy voice in my head, what I call the crazy aunt in the attic voice in my head, directing me, shaming me, telling me that there was no way I could do it right. No matter what I did, even if I did what the crazy aunt told me I should do, the crazy aunt would flip and say, no, I didn't really mean that. You should do the opposite. So there was no winning with that voice. The amount of, I would say, fear and doubt, contempt I had for myself, and just a sort of low level, I don't mean to make this sound like it sounded when I lived in the hell realm with food. This was more a kind of low-level anxiety, self-loathing, if you can call self-loathing low-level, lack and discontent. And so I decided to try to use the same things I've used with food with the entire rest of my life, to see if I could approach it differently, rather than trying to fix myself or change myself or improve myself. Not that there weren't places that didn't need my attention. There were, but the way I'd been trying to do it was with force and deprivation and shame. And so I stopped that and learned an entirely different approach to dealing with the everyday situations that most of us get in all the time: rejection, feelings of abandonment, anxiety, sleeplessness, illness, blame and judgment, holding grudges, things like that.
Well, it's funny. I related so much to this book because of the fact that I used to think that I was a fix-it project. So I would work with as many coaches and healers and go to programs and, because I have to be fixed. There's something inherently wrong with me. So I've got to keep improving myself.
Yes.
And the day that I got that there's nothing wrong with me, literally got that, I'm like, well, now what do I do?
Right.
My whole purpose has been about fixing myself. If I don't have to fix myself, now what do I do?
Right. I know. And, that's the conundrum right there, because that's what I'm trying to communicate in this book, which is sort of parallel to what I was communicating with food, which is that I told people that dieting didn't work, but so many people heard that as, now what do I do? I've been on a fixing project with my weight for all these years, and at least it gives me something to do. It gives me an improvement project, and if I stop dieting, but I still don't like the size of my body, I'm still whatever it was to do with food, I don't know what to do. And so many people heard what I was saying about food in those years, which of course I still am, because I'm still teaching retreats about that and other things, as, oh, she's telling me not to diet, therefore I should just sit around, eat bonbons and watch, reruns of the West Wing all day long, because I no longer have the self-improvement project. And so it's exactly what you just said. If you spent your time fixing yourself up, there's always another thing to do. What do you do when you drop it? And the thing is, what I find, and so my answer to that is that it's not like when you stop trying to fix yourself, you didn't have issues, challenges, situations in your life. You still got colds or sick or felt rejected by friends, or, had nights that were tough or days that were tough, or failures and successes and whatever you want to call it. Life goes on. We're still in the middle of the messiness of life. Yeah. Just because you don't take yourself, there isn't one big thing to do to fix it, doesn't mean that there aren't situations that happen that you can have an entirely different approach to. That's not about fixing yourself, but it's about being with those and learning how to accept them, change them if they need to be changed, speak up if you need to speak up. For instance, with a lot of women I work with, and for myself too, we've had problems with boundaries. Yeah. With saying no, with feeling like we're not allowed to say no. We're not allowed to say, I don't want to. We're not allowed to say, go away. We're not allowed to even say, come closer when we feel like that. What I realized about my own body, this is an example. So even though I had healed my relationship with food, and my weight was no longer an issue, I'm at the weight that my body's meant to be, there were still issues about me feeling like I didn't own my body, that my body really wasn't mine, that I had interpreted what I had learned about women's bodies into me, so that I didn't feel like I was allowed to have boundaries or say no or could own this space. And so that dealing with that wasn't about fixing it, wasn't about being broken. It was actually about seeing what was true. Oh, I see, I don't feel like I own my own body. That was objectively true. That's not a place that was broken and a fix-up project. That was seeing, oh, wow, now what? And what I learned with working with myself and the women in my retreats, and I call this in this Messy Magnificent Life, the book, the Red String Project, because I give 100 women a piece of red string and tell them to make a boundary around themselves, and 3/4 of them start crying immediately because they feel like they're not allowed to, they're not supposed to, they'll get in trouble if they have a boundary. Now, just seeing that gives them a sense of, oh, wow. And then it becomes clear what to do next. So the feelings around that come up, wow, and they start crying, they start realizing that, and then they realize the difference between their unconscious beliefs and what's actually true now. And that's what we're talking about.
That's so beautiful. It's true. So when you stop working on yourself in that sense, there's always going to be like, oh, I'm feeling limitations. How do we get beyond this? How do I create a boundary? We always have emotions that tell us, I'm feeling angry because a boundary is being crossed.
Yes.
But it's like, we're not going through it. You actually get to enjoy life and have gratitude for your life.
That's right.
I want to read this part about your book because it just really hit me as a person that helps people move from lack to abundance. It just touched me in a way that I just want to share with everybody. And I really recommend that. Not only is this book hysterical, but it's so grounded and it's so healing. So we're going to put a link underneath the video so you can go directly to like Amazon and purchase the book. But this just really touched me. Many parts of the book did. But when we look at the world with hungry eyes, we only see lack. Everything. People, meals, situation look like food we're desperate for. But the second we name what we're doing, the second we pay attention to it, we're no longer merged with it. We're no longer wandering in the desert or hoarding bowls of ice cream for starving for love. We're that awareness. We are the awareness that notices that we are wandering in the desert, hoarding the ice cream, starving for love. Attention is everything. And without it, all else is a temporary fix and no long-lasting change is possible. It really touched me when it's that awareness that.
Yes, that's right. Right, exactly. Because when you're aware that you're having a struggle, you're not actually in the struggle anymore. It's sort of like you're in one part of the house and the struggle is happening in another part of the house, but from the awareness, which is like dropping the war with yourself. Awareness is akin to dropping the battle with yourself, to dropping the self-improvement project, but seeing objectively what needs to be done. So, I feel hungry, and to that whole part, I talk to people a lot about being in their bodies, standing in their own two shoes. That's one of the touchstones that I use, of inhabiting, feeling their feet on the floor, their hands, wiggling their hands, breathing, feeling their bellies, because it's from their bodies and our bodies. And this is something I was really guilty of for a very long time. I wasn't interested. I was interested in the size of my thighs. I was interested in not having cellulite and not having chicken wing arms. But I wasn't really interested in living in my body. It sounded boring. I loved my mind. But then I realized, whoa, my body is the place from which decisions can happen naturally. I can say no, but that requires the willingness to kind of stand in your own two shoes, be aware of your power. That has to do with power, that you already have what you need.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's embodiment. It's you
Right.
in your body and living from and through your body.
Yes.
Which, like you said, most of us are up here that we don't go into our hearts. We don't go into our power center and feel that embodiment of how powerful we really are.
Right.
Yeah. And the other thing you said in your book that I wanted to read as well is that, and this is the hardest part, the harder part, because we live in a culture that worships more. We're so brainwashed into believing that more is better, and we no longer question what it costs or whether it adds anything to our lives. We keep believing that there is an elusive tipping point when we will finally become enough. But no matter how thin we get or how much money we make, that point doesn't get any closer. And in the meantime, we spend our days riding the roller coaster of dissatisfaction, discontent, and disease. Yeah,
Right. I know it's not actually funny, but when it's just put like that, then there is a sense of, right, when do we ever have enough? And based on the culture we live in, the answer is never. Because if you're just going to base it on that, there's always more to be had. You know, when I was interviewing financial advisors about money after we lost ours, they said to me, no matter how much a client ever made. So a client could come in and say, my goal is to have a $500,000 retirement plan, or a $200,000 retirement plan, or a $10 million retirement plan. It didn't matter. When they reached that point, they always wanted more. 100% of the time. And so there's a sense in us of looking with hungry eyes. And one of the things that I talk about in the book, and I'll tell you a story about somebody who's done this that I've worked with, is really seeing what you have right now. So part of that is standing in your own two shoes. Part of that is disengaging from what I called the crazy aunt in the attic, because that voice in the head that is shouting at you, you're not good enough, you never had enough. Most of us are merged with that voice, and we think that voice is us. We don't actually realize it's a crazy aunt. We think it's our voice, and it's not our voice, and that voice is not our friend. And so the book talks about disengaging from that voice. But with one of my students who could never feel like she had enough, what she's done now every day is write to us about 5 things that she's seen that day that are enough, that are gorgeous, that what's good, what's not wrong about your life right now, what do you have enough of right now. And what started happening with her, somebody who always saw the glass as half empty, is that now she goes through her life looking for gorgeousness and seeing it, because you actually see what you believe. It's not that you believe what you see, it's that you see what you believe. Yeah. And so with changing the neural circuitry, she has really started looking and seeing and being aware of her own gorgeousness. So it's beautiful. And that's how I know change is really possible.
You know, and that's invoking the law of sufficiency and abundance. You can never come from a place of lack and create abundance in your life. And the doorway to abundance is coming from satisfaction. So when you're looking for, like you're saying, the positive aspects, the gorgeousness, the things to appreciate and be grateful for now, that is the doorway into more, and that is the doorway into abundance. But you're not coming from that hungry, I need more. It's everything's good right now. And one thing you said in the book, I just wanted to read this.
Yeah, sure.
Having enough came down to moment choices of attention.
Right.
Where are you focusing your attention? Is it enough, or do you have enough? Are you, like the example you just gave about your client, what you're looking for, seeing through the eyes of this is gorgeous.
Yes.
Versus this is good and right versus this is bad and wrong.
Yes, that's right. In the book, I tell the story of when my husband and I lost our money, and it was 30 years of retirement savings gone in a second. And which I won't go into how that happened. It was because we were dumb, really. But
I'd say more trusting of the wrong person, but not dumb. Okay.
I realized, and this was a lesson I learned that I talked about in this book, I realized that the only way I could make it through the night, because we weren't sure we were going to have enough money to stay in our house that very month, the only way I could make it through the night was to do exactly what you and I are talking about, to look for, on a moment to moment level, what I hadn't lost and not what I had, to see what I could find. not what I had lost, to see what was good. And because it was so critical that I do this, and I think the reason why most people don't do this is it might not be critical enough for them. For me, I felt like I was just gonna explode with terror.
Oh, I
And rage, and if I didn't get my mind focused on the good, on what I could find. And within a couple of days, everything changed. Nothing changed on the outside. And that's what I want people to really understand, that it's not the situation. Yes, it's a situation. Yes, it was a dire situation that my husband and I were in, not now. We're not in that now, but we were in a dire situation. It was the story I was telling myself about the situation that was causing so much agony. And that's what I'm talking about with what you mentioned at the very beginning. When you stop the self-improvement project, then what happens is you stop telling yourself those stories about how awful you are, how damaged you are, how doomed you are. And when I stopped telling myself the story about how awful the situation was, and started actually looking for what could be found, and being thrilled with a purple teacup, the flower that had just come out. I mean, I couldn't believe what I had been missing, because I had been living in this self-constructed world of suffering and of lack. And I wasn't seeing, and most people don't see, half. I would venture to say 85% of the lushness and the beauty that's in front of us, because we're living in our own worlds of lack. And it takes something to pierce the trance. And I'm hoping this book will do it for many people.
Geneen, I know it will for many people. Absolutely. Your work is just really, I mean, again, I wanted to have you on my show for this reason, because it's just groundbreaking that you bring through. It's just, you bring in such a divinity, to just such a divine, like, what's next, leading edge conversation. And that's what I appreciate so much about the work that you do in the world. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is because, my brand, and I have a new book coming out at the end of the year called Quantum Success in Your Career.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited. And there's different aspects of what I feel is quantum success. And, you have had, as an author, as a coach, as a healer, I mean, you've had an amazing career and created quantum success. I mean, even just thinking of the last time you were on Oprah and your book, excuse me, going and staying at #1 New York Times and being able to reach millions and millions of people. It's like, I would love to hear from you. What do you do internally to create quantum success for yourself?
What I do is that I keep doing what I love, and that I keep using that as my guidance. That when people suggest that I veer away from, my brand, so to speak, I don't usually think of it as my brand, because I don't use that kind of language, because, I'm a writer. And so I kind of like muddle out from the back door to my writing studio and back to the back door of the house again. And so I don't think in terms of brands, but for this conversation, let's say it like that. I know what I'm good at. I know what I love. I know what gives me energy. I know what lights me up. I know what feels, I also have a sense of sort of purpose, and what my contract is this time on earth. I mean, it's an odd way of saying it, but I just feel that. And every time I start wandering away from that, it's not to good results.
Yeah.
So I just stay on purpose there. And because of that, like with the publication of this book, There's been, I could have gone many different ways with this book and had many different messages, but I have just felt like it's so important to stay true to what I know and what I love, and then help comes, and to ask for help, and help comes. So that's what I would say.
I love it. It's the concept I talk about as far as self-regulating.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, when you're in your lane, and when you're getting out of your lane.
Yes, right.
And you're so clear of what your lane is.
Yes, right. Somebody once said to me, you don't go to a Birkenstock store to buy Nikes. So, so be clear about, what it is that, you want people to know. Are you selling Nikes or are you selling Birkenstocks? And so I'm pretty clear about that. And so I stay with that. I would say, Christy, the other thing that I do, and this is a new practice that I've developed, and this isn't exactly what you asked, but I do want to mention this because it's so radical to most people, is that I stopped complaining about anything. So I just have, and this is related to what I was saying and what I've written about in the book. I started this as I was writing the book. And I started it because I realized that what most of my conversations with people were basically, I don't like the way it's going. I don't like the way it is. I don't like what just happened. Some subtle form of disagreement and negativity about what was already happening or had already happened. And so stand in my own two shoes, and as the touchstone, and disengage from the crazy ant in the attic as another touchstone, who the crazy ant is always saying, this is wrong, and that's wrong, and this is wrong, and you did that wrong, and how could you have done that? And then I would sort of take that out on other people. And I decided, as I was writing this book, and I talk about the entire process because it's so radical, I decided I was going to stop complaining. When I said this to two friends of mine, fabulous couple in their 30s, about not complaining, they said, we don't know what we would talk about to each other.
It's true.
What I found when I didn't tell my husband, Matt, that I had stopped complaining. So I took it on as a practice. And that was part of what's not wrong, what's good. He asked me after a week, I didn't tell him I was doing this. He asked me if I had the flu because I was so quiet when I would have ordinarily been complaining. But what started happening without complaining, and of course I tell my students about this all the time, and I urge them to spend at least one whole day not complaining. What started happening is that there was a re-enchantment of everyday life, was that I started feeling lighter and lighter, that there was a goodness that could come through, much like focusing on what I hadn't lost, but what I could find. This was in a much more pervasive way, not complaining. And so I urge everybody who's listening, try it. See what happens. Yeah.
Well, it's so true, because complaining is so rooted in lack and limitation. And so when you let go of that and you replace it with, when you have nothing to complain about, it's like the natural part of you wants to look for what's good and right. What are the blessings? Where's the beauty? What's good about life? And that's a totally different vibrational point. And you're going to be attracting from law of attraction, attracting so many different things in your life when you stop having that anchor of complaining. I love that.
And that's right. And what happens, and this goes back to when we stop the self-improvement project, or, I call it in the book, dropping the me project. When you stop complaining about what's going on, it leaves you much more room to decide what to do about what's going on. So rather than, as you and I both felt like well, what do I do now? If I stop the self-improvement project, what am I going to do with all my time? And, I often say this to women all the time about food and weight. If you took the energy, even half the energy that you use focusing on the size of your body and the weight, and used that energy to to do what you love, to figure out what you love, to make changes in your life. Remember, dropping the me project isn't about not changing. It's really about being much clearer and decisive about what needs your attention in your life, and working to change that. But not from a negative point, not because you're against something, but because you're moving towards something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? We'd probably be a lot less exhausted and a lot less overwhelmed and, just completely tapped out and sick and depressed and all that if we took all that energy and focused it on the good instead of what's wrong and bad.
Yes. Yeah. It changes relationships. What I found is, I've been with my husband now for a lot of years, and I adore him, and we have a wonderful relationship. And when I stopped complaining, it changed our relationship. It made it lighter too. He's quite an optimistic person, and I'm more like, give me lemonades and I'll make them into lemons. And so I stopped doing that. And there was the background, I would say, magic of life. And I was much better able, I had a lot more energy to do what I love to do, to write, to teach, to interact with people, to walk outside, to do whatever it was, and all that from one practice of not complaining.
Love it. So just so that doesn't feel overwhelming, go 1 hour, just 1 hour.
1 hour. I love it.
1 hour, even if you have to go 1 minute, just put that into practice and then stretch it out to another hour, another hour.
Beautiful.
And that's it'll be a day.
Yes. Baby steps is always the way to do anything. Always the way to do anything. And what you really want to pay attention to with that is see how it feels, because just as we were saying, awareness is actually what changes everything. That's the change agent here. We think it's, if I learn this, and if I learn that, and if I learn this, and I learn that, then I'll learn this new skill, and that will, no, it's awareness that will facilitate the change. Because what you might find, those of you who are listening to this, is what I found is what my retreat students find, and I became aware instantly of, oh my goodness, I can't believe every other word that comes out of my mouth is a complaint. And, it was shocking to me to see that. Yeah. I don't know if you know who Leonard Cohen is, the poet and the beautiful singer. And he spent 10 years in a Zen monastery. And what he said was the main thing he learned was to stop whining. And I think that's sort of what a complaint is. It's here's what happened, and here's why I don't like what happened.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. And it's already happened. And so it's like spinning your wheels. That's what I realized about complaining. It wasn't changing anything. And what I'm interested in this book is, how do we change? How do we actually change? And so that's part of what the question that I wanted to answer in writing this book.
So I just urge all of you to go buy Geneen Roth's book, The Messy Magnificent Life. You're going to love it. You're going to take so much out of it. When I say she's leading edge, she's very leading edge. So Geneen, I am so grateful and honored. I feel like it was just a complete sister connection from the other side. I know she's always with me and guiding me. And I feel very blessed that I got to finally meet the woman that changed her life, that eventually, and through her, changed my life. So thank you for all that you do in the world. I know that this book is, The Messy Magnificent Life is going to add so much understanding about ourselves to the planet, to everybody, that we can finally just enjoy our lives.
Yes, and do what we need to do to protect, the things, the places, the children, our hearts, our bodies that need protection. Yes, everything. It's all involved in that. And I hope people come to my website too to see. You'll spell my name, right?
Yes. Well, you know what? We'll link it under the video for sure.
Okay. Christy, I have loved talking to you. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Much love to you.
Much love to you too. And everybody go and let me know what you're taking away from this video. When Geneen gave so much tidbits and information, and I challenge you for 1 hour, like Geneen said, don't complain. And when you hear yourself complain, say, what do I want? What would I love? What would that feel like? Instead of focusing on what's bad and wrong, focus on what's good and right. So leave me a comment. Let's continue the conversation. Go below the video to learn more about Geneen and her amazing work. And I really urge you to go get her book. Thanks, everybody. Have an amazing week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching, and here is a related video to watch right now. Also, check out my free webinars on creating whatever you want in your life using the universal laws that I explain in each webinar. So share your thoughts by leaving a comment and continue the conversation at christywhitman.com.